So when we're trying to do trig functions, we're always looking at a right triangle. Ooh, that's really big. And we always want to label one of the angles. So I'm going to call that the angle of interest. I'll call that x. And then from that angle, I'm going to label all the sides of the triangle. So if I think of this as an eye, then that eye is looking at that side. So I call that the observed side or the opposite side. The one opposite the right angle is the hypotenuse. And then the one next to the angle is the adjacent side. And so you have these different ratios for these three trig functions. So sine is the opposite of hypotenuse, cosine is the adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite over adjacent. And so I don't get these two mixed up, I always remember that it's a sin to be a hoe. I think I told you that last week. So when I am trying to find a side, I can say that the sine of x is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. When I'm trying to solve for the actual angle x, then I do the inverse sine, and then I stick the ratio inside. And that gives me the angle for x. So the inverse is always finding an angle. The ratio is always trying to find one of these two sides. So let's use trig to do a couple of those questions over there. What are the two sides? I can't read it from here.
8 and 16.
And I'm going to label this angle x. So I know I could use Pythagorean theorem to find that side, but let's try to figure out what these two angles are and then use trig to find that side. And like I told you last week, we can use Pythagorean theorem to check to make sure everything works, right? So if this is my angle, what would this side be? Adjacent, opposite, or hypotenuse?
Adjacent.
And that side would be?
Opposite.
And that side is hypotenuse. So when I have these two sides, I'm going to go with that trig function because it has those two sides in it. So I'm going to say that the tangent inverse of the opposite over the adjacent is equal to my angle. You cool with that? Okay, so we're just going to stick that in our calculator. So I'm going to hit second tan of 1 divided by 2 because that's that reduced. And it gives me that angle. So this angle is 26.6 degrees. I guess you might as well write it out because we're doing the questions, right? If that's 26.6 degrees, how do I find this one?
You do the same thing, but starting with that angle. So you'd switch the opposite and the adjacent.
Okay, so I'm going to say the tangent of inverse of 16 over 8, which would be the tangent of 2. So let's do that. So you can keep on looking because I'll just write it up.
I was looking for a calculator.
Oh.
He said no. He said he had one, but it's some like 40-year-old calculator that I don't feel like using.
All right, so that's 63.4 degrees. Okay, now that I have both of my angles, I just want to find this side. So what trig function do you want to use to do that?
To find the
hypotenuse. Which two trig functions can I use?
Sine and cosine.
Sine or cosine, so which one do you want to use? It doesn't matter to me.
Sine.
Okay. So I'm going to use the sine of, I'm going to use this angle of 26.6 degrees is equal to, if I use that angle, then that side is the opposite side, right? So that's going to be 8 over h. And when you have your h on the bottom, remember from last week I just told you,
divide by
yeah,
sine.
those two just switch places. So h is equal to 8 divided by the sine of 26.6 degrees. So let's do that.
Couldn't you, like, since we started off with x and found x, couldn't you just subtract that by
from 90? Yeah, that's the other way you can check.
Okay.
Right? There's always two different ways to do the question. So, right, I could have just taken this, subtracted from 90, and I would have got that. But it was actually good that you did it using trig because you're trying to practice trig.
Yeah.
And you also proved that that's true because these two, with the reciprocals, are basically, what's the word? It starts with a C, means 90.
Opposite of supplementary. Or not
Yeah,
opposite.
different from supplementary, right?
Complementary.
Complementary. So when you have the reciprocal, they're always complementary with one another.
Yeah.
We're using the same trig function. So let's figure out what this side is going to be. So I'm going to stick it in my calculator again. And I'm going to do 8 divided by the sine of 26.6. And so this side is, so not screaming on, 17, I didn't even see what it was, 17.9. And that's it. Okay, so